In this episode, we're going to focus on what happens after a risk decision is made, because this is where many programs quietly fail. They decide, they document, and then they stop paying attention. Testing, monitoring, and reporting are the activities that keep risk management connected to reality as systems change, people change, and new threats appear. Beginners sometimes imagine monitoring as a wall of screens or a stream of alerts, but that is only one small part of the story. Monitoring can include tracking whether controls are operating as intended, whether known issues are being remediated on time, and whether risk levels are drifting outside agreed tolerances. Reporting is not just sending a status email. It is communicating what matters, what is changing, and what decisions are needed in a way that leaders and teams can act on. Operational follow-through means that someone is responsible for noticing when the world changes and for triggering the right response, instead of assuming yesterday's conclusions are still valid today. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A simple way to understand this is to think of risk management as a loop rather than a line. You identify and analyze risk, choose treatment, implement controls, or accept residual risk, and then you must check whether your assumptions remain true. Testing is how you validate that controls and processes actually work, not just that they exist. Monitoring is how you watch for changes, failures, or signals that risk is increasing. Reporting is how you translate what you learned into decisions, priorities, and accountability. If any part of the loop is missing, the loop breaks, and risk management becomes a one-time exercise that quickly becomes stale. For beginners, the big mental shift is realizing that the value is not the initial analysis, but the ongoing ability to detect drift and correct it before harm occurs. Testing can sound intimidating, but at a conceptual level, it simply means checking whether a control produces the outcome it is supposed to produce. If the organization relies on backups to reduce impact, testing includes validating that data can actually be restored and that the restored data is usable. If the organization relies on access control to reduce likelihood, testing includes confirming that only the right people can reach sensitive functions and that changes to permissions are controlled. If the organization relies on monitoring to detect incidents, testing includes confirming that important signals are captured and that alerts reach the right people in time to act. The key is that testing focuses on outcomes, not on appearance. A control that looks good on paper but fails when needed does not reduce risk. It simply creates a false sense of safety. There are different kinds of testing, and beginners should learn to distinguish between initial validation and ongoing verification. Initial validation is what you do after implementing a control or treatment to confirm it works at least once under expected conditions. Ongoing verification is what you do regularly to confirm the control still works as the environment changes. For example, a one-time check that access is correct does not prove access will stay correct after staff turnover, role changes, or system upgrades. Ongoing verification can be scheduled, triggered by changes, or prompted by observed anomalies, but it has the same purpose: preventing silent failure. Silent failure is dangerous because it means the organization believes a risk is treated when it is not. When you design testing and verification with that in mind, you build confidence that your controls continue to reduce risk over time. Monitoring is broader than security event monitoring, and that broader view is what keeps risk management operational instead of theoretical. Monitoring includes watching key indicators that relate to risk, such as whether critical issues are being closed within agreed timeframes, whether exceptions are expiring, and whether control performance is degrading. It can include tracking service availability trends, recurring failures, and changes in dependency health, because operational instability can be both a risk and a signal of deeper weaknesses. Monitoring also includes watching for changes in assets and exposure, such as a system that becomes more externally reachable or begins storing new categories of data. The goal is not to monitor everything. It is to monitor the things that tell you whether your risk assumptions remain true. For beginners, it helps to think of monitoring as a set of questions you ask repeatedly. Is the situation the same, better, or worse than when we made the decision. A critical concept here is defining what signals actually matter, because undefined monitoring quickly becomes noise. If you do not define what you are watching for and what action it triggers, you end up with information that nobody uses. Good monitoring includes thresholds or conditions, like when a certain type of issue becomes overdue or when a risk indicator crosses a boundary. The moment you set a threshold, you also set an expectation for response, such as escalating to a decision maker, initiating remediation, or revisiting acceptance. This is where risk tolerance becomes practical because tolerances can be expressed as measurable boundaries, and monitoring tells you whether you are within them. Beginners should understand that monitoring without response is not protection. It is only awareness, and awareness alone does not reduce harm. Reporting is the bridge between operational data and decision-making, and it is persuasive when it is focused and consistent. Beginners often think a report must include everything, but decision-makers need clarity more than volume. A strong report answers simple, high-value questions like which risks have increased, which issues are blocking treatment plans, which controls are failing or drifting, and what decisions are required now. It also explains the difference between status and meaning, because a list of open issues is not the same as explaining which issues threaten critical outcomes. Reporting should also be timely, because old information creates a false sense of stability. When reporting is regular and consistent, leaders can compare trends over time and make better choices about priorities and resources. Operational follow-through is the part that ensures testing, monitoring, and reporting actually lead to action. Follow-through includes clear ownership of tasks, clear deadlines, and clear escalation paths when deadlines are missed or when conditions change. It also includes managing exceptions and accepted risks, because acceptance is not a permanent resting place unless it is explicitly intended to be. If an accepted risk has a review date, follow-through means that review actually happens and that someone brings updated facts to the table. If a treatment plan is delayed, follow-through means someone assesses whether the delay increases risk beyond tolerance and whether temporary compensating controls are needed. For beginners, the lesson is that follow-through is not a personality trait. It is a design process that makes action predictable rather than accidental. A common failure mode is measuring activity instead of effectiveness, and this is worth calling out because it affects how people report and how leaders interpret progress. Activity measures might include how many issues were closed or how many reviews were completed, but those numbers do not necessarily show risk reduction. Effectiveness measures are closer to outcomes, like reduced downtime, improved detection speed, reduced recurrence of specific incidents, or improved compliance with key control expectations. Effectiveness is harder to measure, but even a beginner can understand the principle. Doing many tasks is not the same as improving safety and reliability. When you design reporting around effectiveness, you align everyone toward outcomes instead of checklists. This also makes the program more credible because it shows that the organization cares about real improvement, not just paperwork. Another important idea is learning and adjustment, because risk management that never changes is often a sign that it is not paying attention. If testing shows that a control is unreliable, the program should adjust the control, the process, or the assumptions. If monitoring shows a rising trend in a certain kind of issue, the program should consider whether there is a root cause that needs attention, such as unclear ownership, weak training, or inconsistent change practices. If reporting repeatedly highlights the same block treatment plans, leadership may need to remove obstacles by reallocating resources or adjusting priorities. This adjustment cycle is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of a living program. Beginners should see that the point is not to get everything right once, but to reduce uncertainty and improve control performance over time. Finally, it's useful to connect these ideas to credibility and trust, because testing, monitoring, and reporting are how an organization earns confidence that it is managing risk rather than just talking about it. When controls are tested and verified, people trust that protection will work when needed. When monitoring is focused and action-driven, people trust that drift will be caught before it becomes a crisis. When reporting is clear and decision-oriented, leaders trust that they are hearing what matters and not being overwhelmed with noise. When follow-through is consistent, teams trust that risk decisions are real commitments, not temporary promises that fade. This trust matters because it changes behavior. Teams raise issues earlier, leaders approve treatments faster, and the whole organization becomes more resilient. To conclude, testing, monitoring, and reporting are the mechanisms that keep risk management tied to operational reality, and operational follow-through is what turns information into action. Testing validates that controls and treatments produce the outcomes they were chosen for, and ongoing verification ensures those outcomes remain true as change happens. Monitoring watches for drift, failure, and changing conditions that move risk outside acceptable boundaries, and it must be designed with thresholds and responses to avoid noise. Reporting translates operational observations into clear priorities and decision points, and it becomes persuasive when it focuses on meaning and trends rather than raw volume. When follow-through is built into the process through ownership, deadlines, escalation, and review, risk management becomes a reliable loop that improves over time instead of a one-time exercise that grows stale. That loop is what protects the organization from the most common failure of all, assuming that yesterday's protections will automatically work tomorrow.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.